Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Push channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the frantic attempts to trash, humiliate, and undermine, besmirch, defame all high achievers in the Western sort of culture. So now Western culture has a lot to be proud of in terms of achievements in modern history terms. 98% of all inventions have been invented by white Western males, straight white males, and the inventions are just absolutely numerous at all levels, at all types of technology, and whether it be in medicine or engineering or you name it, science and um, in every respect, Western inventors and innovators are at the forefront and at the apex. So, because the achievements of Western civilization are so vast, white Western civilization are so vast, the effort required to trash it all and crush it all has to be similarly large and similarly vast. The achievements are vast. The decisions being made by the globalists. We have to undermine all these achievements. We have to cut white Western society, particularly straight white males. We have to cut them off from their achievements of the past. And the way to do that is to defame every single white Western achiever. But where will the money come from to do all this defaming? Well, we'll take it from straight white Western males. We'll take their money to trash their history and their culture. Oh, goodness me, what? I mean, that in itself is an achievement. And the globalists are going about it with great gusto. Now, I first came across this, I suppose, the late 1980s, I guess. I'm still a fairly youngish sort of executive. I would have been, I wouldn't even have been 30 at that time. Probably passing my mid-20s, but I was like a general manager of this business unit, which was pretty much standalone. So I was kind of the CEO, I guess, in as much as I only had to meet my boss sort of once every month, if not once a quarter, and so it's left pretty much to me. Anyway, there'd been a merger with another company, and we were getting a bunch of people in, or a couple of people in, to sort of crunch some of the numbers that we needed to, and a temp was brought in, a lady who really her job was to sit in the corner with a bunch of spreadsheets and just do a lot of arithmetic. None of it particularly complicated, but it was there was a need for exactitude. So she was a temp. I didn't hire her, but because of the flow of things, I ended up having to work reasonably closely with her, or just checking and giving guidance as to how the numbers were meant to go. So now I'll tell you a little bit about it, because this is where I first came across this idea of, or this practice rather, of trashing Western, white Western high achievers and heroes and icons and so on. Now, she was probably a B grade student, so she wasn't a moron, but was no genius. She's a B grade student and had come from quite a feminist family. Her mother was one of these radical placard-waving feminists who divorced a reasonably well-to-do man and lived off his money while she indulged her fantasies of men hatred. And she, to a large extent, instilled this in the daughter, who was bisexual. She needed men for money and that sort of thing, needed women for sex, as far as I could tell. Anyway, not that this was apparent or that I cared for that matter at the outset. Now, I was satisfied she was competent to crunch the numbers as required, and my thoughts about it didn't really go anything beyond that. But as it came out in the wash, given again that we were often sitting down and going through some of these numbers, it came out that she'd been encouraged to do a STEM course back in the day. Now she'd got the affirmative action wave through into the STEM course. At least they were doing that back at the time, but they weren't helping. There was no help once you got into the STEM course. So they'd give you a wild card entry, if you like, but then you actually had to pass. And again, being a B grade, maybe even B plus student, she just simply wasn't up to it. In those days, only the brightest kids were getting into those STEM courses, and they were 99.5% straight white male. So she flunked. They let her stay on for. She flunked the first year. They let her stay on for a second year, which they probably shouldn't have done. And then she flunked that as well. So then she switched from that STEM course. I don't know what it was, like physics or chemistry or something. And then she decided to go for an easy course and do gender studies. So now this is gender studies at the time. I'd never even heard of it back then. And she was. This is a course that nobody fails. Now she started talking to me about it because I'd mentioned something about something to do with mathematics, germane to the work she was doing, and I mentioned Isaac Newton. Somehow it came up in passing conversation. Isaac Newton, given his role in certainly modern day mathematics. I mean, you can go back to Pythagoras and whatever, but she then came back and says, "Well, did you know that Isaac Newton was really gay and he was probably transgender and he stole, his mathematical theories from the black lesbian who was, and she had all this stuff. I'm paraphrasing now, and she didn't say exactly that, but she had all this stuff that Isaac Newton had actually achieved. None of the things that he was credited with. He'd stolen everything from black lesbians and women and so on. And by the way, he also was a racist and a rapist and an oppressor and all the sort of the headline issues that the radical feminists love to invent about how evil men are. And she came out with all this stuff, and I thought, well, goodness me, where'd you get that rubbish from? And I thought, well, what absolute nonsense. And she, oh no, it's true. And then she went into, did you know that Pythagoras was really a black lesbian? And did you know that Louis Pasteur was in fact a homosexual black lesbian, or something, and just there was not one single straight white male icon or mathematician or people that have a role in history, a prominent role in history in the case of Isaac Newton, Louis Pasteur, and so on, Pythagoras, and but they were all either deeply and horribly flawed, evil, in fact. Did you know that so-and-so used to own 1,000 slaves and he beat them every day and raped them and murdered them? He was actually Hitler, really. You didn't know that? And we said, where did she get all this from? Where did you get all this from? I was interested that somebody, again, she's not a moron, okay? So she's a terrible chip on her shoulder. She's convinced that she failed science or the STEM courses. She only failed it because there were straight white males in charge of it. It was the patriarchy that prevented her from getting a quadruple PhD in physics. It was them that did it. If they hadn't been there, she'd have had that. But didn't you just fail? Well, if I did fail, it's only because they didn't encourage me enough. If I failed, it's only because they didn't promise me a glittering job on huge money. It was because of that. Somehow she would always come back to the idea that it was the patriarchy and straight white males that prevented her. Was it her? Should she take responsibility for simply not being able to pass the test? No, of course not. It was Hitler that stopped her. And so you could see that mentality back then, which was new to me. I hadn't encountered it previously, or certainly not in this context anyway. And again, had never heard of the gender studies thing. But every straight white male. So I was interested. So I asked her, could you bring me in some of this course material? I mean, do you still have it? And this was pre sort of internet, so you couldn't like go online and do all the checking that you can now. So she brought me in some stuff that was absurd. Now I've got a good background in history, so I know quite a few of the things, simple things like dates and places, but other stuff too. I could look at the gender studies, and it was insane that there was no attempt to be accurate. And it's a bit like the reporting we see today in the media, that there's this idea, the Taylor Lorenzes and whatever else, this idea of being accurate doesn't matter. It's you're getting across the ideological vibe. That's the thing here. Accuracy, who cares? So facts are irrelevant when you're pursuing an ideological situation which has pre-set and pre-asserted conditions that you then apply to the arguments that you make. All straight white men are Hitler. You start from that point. Do you have to prove it or no? You start from that position, and anything Hitler does is bad. Therefore, anything straight white males do is bad because they're Hitler. So you can start. This is the logic they apply. So just looking at George Washington of United States Revolutionary War fame was being defamed in one of the documents that she brought, and so I was having a look at this and just picking apart the dates there. Well, that can't have been right. No, that's 50 years out. Well, that's not right. This guy died 3 years before Washington was born, and you can just look at how they put together they start. He's evil. He's bad. He's Hitler. And we just need to throw anything out there because the vibe says he's a bad guy, and we can just make up facts because it doesn't change the vibe, that the ideological vibe that he's actually Hitler. And that's how they do the whole thing. So all the trashing was very trashing of the Western icons and the high achiever, and they purposely picked the high achievers, the ones that were most notorious for these. Louis Pasteur is a case in point. His discovery of germs and so on. That was a major step forward, certainly in medical science, and he rightfully deserves a very prominent place in any discussion and any history of that. So why? But they were, even in this gender studies course, they were really going for him, really attempting to say, well, you can't look at his achievements. Either he didn't achieve it, or he's so fucking evil that his evilness transcends and goes over those achievements. Therefore, he must not be remembered for his achievements, but instead for his evilness. That was the two directions they went in. So there were other things where, that guy actually didn't really discover it. He had a black slave, and she did it. And by the way, she was also a lesbian. So they attempted to do this absurd rewriting in history, and this woman had gone for a lot of this, not because I think she necessarily believed it per se, but it supported her notion that I am a victim of the patriarchy. That is why I have not been successful, and therefore, if I embrace this, it explains away and doubly confirms my victimhood of patriarchy if I accept this narrative as being true. I don't think deep down she actually believed it, or certainly didn't believe all of it, but it was comfortable for her to embrace it wholeheartedly. So she'd gone from being a failed science student into being an absolute AAA grade gender studies student. So with a gender studies degree. At the time, you couldn't get jobs having a gender studies degree. The only jobs you could get would be in the divorce courts or the rape courts or something like that. Those are the only places that you could get jobs, because they generally wanted men-hating, family-hating people. Now, she was certainly no beauty queen, this woman, but she wasn't averse to getting married, but again, for the money. She wanted a man to take the responsibility and go out and make the money and that sort of thing. So men were suitable, at least for that. But she didn't want to have any children. I don't think she ever would. But last I heard was quite some years ago. Now she hadn't. So this was the crap that was being taught in gender studies classrooms back then. And I did some cursory inquiries to find that this gender studies was actually being funded by taxpayer money. So straight white males in government and straight white males in universities, because they were pretty much all straight white males back then, were signing off on this, knowing that it was a course. How it ended up as a university course is beyond me, but knowing it was a course that specifically taught hatred, absolutely vitriolic, passionate hatred of straight white males in the family, and yet taxpayer dollars went to pay for it and to distribute as many of these people out into the world and the workforce as they could. They passed everybody. Everybody walked out with a degree. So you had the most chip on shoulder, consumed with hatred, bitter, angry people, the feminists that were going out and were being legitimized by being given degrees and again, the facts. Talk about facts, and these were the facts. Goodness me. Now, the other things they did was they would exhaustively pore over someone's background. Well, did you know that this isn't fact, but I'm paraphrasing the thing here. But did you know that Louis Pasteur's grandfather kept a slave? Yeah, that's right. Well, if his grandfather kept a slave, even though the grandfather died before Louis Pasteur was born, given that his grandfather kept a slave, or it could have been Newton or anybody, I'm just randomly using Pasteur's name here, because his grandfather kept a slave, that means he's a Nazi. If he's a Nazi, it means he's Hitler. If he's Hitler, that means Louis Pasteur, Isaac Newton's also Hitler. Yeah, Hitler, fucking fascist Nazi Hitler. Yeah, so that means their achievements count for nothing because they're fucking Hitler. And this was the attitude as well that pervaded. Now, I suppose she did her job that was requested of her, and so I've got nothing to complain about in terms of the work she did, and so that's fine. She managed to seduce or have lesbian sex with two of the girls at work, and one of them she was an intern. And she was in the marketing thing, and a very nervous, very jumpy girl, and probably had Asperger's, I would guess. I didn't really have anything to do with her, other than seeing her there every now and again. And it was only after they'd both gone, actually, that it came out that this happened, and I thought back and thought, oh, okay, come to think of it, she was hanging around that girl. I thought she was being a little maternal, because the young girl was quite unsure of herself and lacking in confidence and that sort of thing. She was probably, or she was just out of high school, so I guess she'd have been 18. So I hadn't been aware of that, and so I was a little bit disappointed that this woman had done that, but so for all her claims of moral purity, I don't know that would stack up. The standards that she wants to apply and has been trained through the gender studies course to apply to straight white males, doesn't seem to seems to be rather reluctant in applying those same standards to herself. She then, interestingly, invited me to say, well, did I want to have she could arrange for it that I could do a talk to the gender studies class in the university she'd been to, suggest that her connections to that sort of ideological diaspora were still fairly strong. And well, why would you want me to go to a talk like I'm a straight white male? I mean, I'm the enemy. I mean, you guys are going to get me there and murder me or something. So she's no, 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 and she's quite serious. And again, I got on okay with her in the workplace. We didn't really have any. I mean, there's a couple of times we had words, but we got on okay. And again, she did the job that was asked of her, and she was paid and so on. So there was no discord of any note. But she came out with two interesting things. She said, "Well, you're a little bit unusual in terms of bosses." Oh, how so? I thought I was pretty much run of the mill. And she said, "Look, you don't." You haven't tried to fuck some of the young girls, have sexual relations with some of the young girls in the office, even though, there's a few of them would be more than willing. You haven't, they play up to you and you don't respond and you keep it very professional. And I think, well, okay, don't most people do that? It's the rarity is the people that would exploit that, surely. And she didn't, and most importantly, you don't talk down to women. And I said, well, I've seen people who do, but again, that's rare. But they again in gender studies, they have this view of the Nazi boss that screws all the women in the company and treats women like shit and locks them in the cupboard or something. Like this invention of what men are like, and just sort of thinking about this is probably the first job she'd actually had in the private sector. So she'd come out of gender studies with this view that all straight white male bosses were Hitler, and was a little bit surprised to find that. And again, I think I was probably the first boss she had anything to do with, certainly directly, to find that bosses aren't Hitler, or this one wasn't, and that seemed to didn't figure in her calculations here. Well, hold on a minute. I've been told every boss is Hitler. How come this guy isn't? But again, it shows the ideological sort of training that the gender studies. But now this gender studies, uh, the ideology of gender studies has crept into pretty much every university course. So now we've got teachers, colleges everywhere. That everyone's out there now, and the museums and all that sort of thing. So now there's everyone out there saying that every white Western high achieving scientist or explorer or anybody, a mathematician, doesn't matter. Everyone must be trashed, and they're all evil, and they're all straight. They're all Hitler. And but this is also, I mean, the globalists are funding this and letting these hysterical lunatics, fucking morons loose on us. And their job is to destroy and trash Western society. In the same way, if you look at Pol Pot in Cambodia, the insane Khmer Rouge communists, they did the most, like having courts where adults, were dragged, particularly people of above average IQ, were dragged in courts of children, or they had children as prison guards, like hall monitor informers and this sort of thing. So the ultimate abject humiliation by people who are so much less than you is how you humiliate people to the nth degree. It's what the globalists are doing to us in the West right now. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.